So I have no particular preamble for this. This was just something that actually my partner Liz wanted to see, and we watched together, actually on Valentine's Day in lieu of anything romantic. Um, but that was One Night in Miami. Now, this is a film directed by Regina King, who I like a lot. Regina King is awesome. And it is to call it a true story would probably be overselling it. It is telling a story involving real life people who did know each other and had these kinds of relationships at the time the thing is set, but the actual events specifically depicted are fictionalized. Now those people are Muhammad Ali, pretty much immediately before joining the Nation of Islam and going by that name. So throughout the film, he is mostly referred to as Cassius Clay. Jim Brown, who was an incredibly skilled NFL player who was looking to springboard into acting at the time. Sam Cooke, who was a very well established singer and performer, and by this point was producing works in addition to writing and singing them. And Malcolm X, who at the time that this is set was preparing to leave the Nation of Islam as a formal organization. So the four of them, for the bulk of the movie, are in a hotel room just talking. And it's really, really compelling. I wasn't shocked to find out that this was based on a play. And yet, despite the fact that it is, and I can see very clearly sort of where the cutoff is in terms of, because there's a bunch of stuff before they get to the hotel that is very much like there's no way that was in the play. Like we actually see some boxing matches with Muhammad Ali, or the actor playing Muhammad Ali, who like all these actors nail these parts, but the way he moves, oh dang, does he capture that grace. It's really good and it's incredibly cinematic, and it's the kind of thing that wouldn't have been in a play. But once all four characters get to the hotel room and begin their conversations and interactions there, I did see like, okay, this is where it exists as a stage play. That said, it never really felt particularly stage-y, which is a quality that's difficult to explain or define, but especially if you know theater, is very easy to spot when watching a film where it's like, okay, this still feels like a play. It bounces back and forth and reads like a play. This doesn't really, and it's not through any big dramatic or show off style camera work or anything like that, but the camera is just moving about and is used organically enough to get in there and get the kinds of close-ups and the and get in on the specific actor's performance in a way that feels like it takes advantage of the camera to a degree greater than a lot of more stagey sorts of things feel. Like actually, here's kind of the best comparison I can make. This, in terms of being adapted from a stage play, you can kind of tell it was adapted from a stage play and being very well performed, and not about completely dissimilar topics. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which I reviewed last year, I believe, link up there, was also very good, but it felt more like a stage play. And I think that had more to do with the way the characters in that talked, because on stage there is a greater degree of suspension of disbelief. There has to be, because it's not as inherently immersive as a film, which kind of hides the artifice most of the time. Whereas on a play, like, that this isn't really a hotel, that, the fourth wall is clearly gone. And there's just an advantage of that is it allows you to have interactions, and more particularly often speeches or soliloquies or something along those lines, that don't necessarily read as natural speech but work perfectly well on stage, but can feel a little bit out of place in film. Not always. There are ways to make that work, and as I said, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom was a very good piece, but that was mainly good on the backs of the performances, and I could envision those performances happening on stage. Here, I don't know how much of it is actually adaptational changes in terms of the specifics of the lines in the script. So the script was written by the same person who wrote the original play, so possibly. But without being able to judge whether or not things were changed, the way the parts are played and the way the lines and interactions and even the more speech-esque parts of the dialogue work feel organic and natural in a way that things adapted from stage to film often fail to be. So it really does a masterful job between the subtlety of the camera work and the amazing, convincing, naturalistic performances of these actors to just make it feel like this is a conversation that could have happened. And at no point does it feel like characters are just sort of stating outright their worldview. Even when they kind of are doing that, it doesn't feel like that. It still feels like a conversation. And they're all fantastic. I didn't know, well, half these actors I didn't know at all. I didn't really know Eli Gorey, who plays Muhammad Ali, who again, like, captures that swagger so perfectly. Like, it's an amazing performance. And then there's Kingsley Ben-Adir, who plays Malcolm X, who again does a really good job of capturing all the iconic sort of manners of speech and the presence of Malcolm X that we have from, archive footage and things like that, while making him human and not feel like an impersonation. None of these feel like impersonations. They feel like they are channeling the core aspects of these people. I did know Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Sam Cooke, obviously because I've seen Hamilton, but honestly, the standout for me was Aldous Hodge, who played Jim Brown, it took me a minute to realize where I knew him from. He had been in an episode of Black Mirror. He was in Black Museum, but he kind of stole it from me because so much of his performance is actually kind of something that wouldn't have been able to be captured on stage, which is just like watching his face and watching him think about and mull over everything else going on around him. He probably says the least of the four, but it feels like when he talks, it has the most emphasis and the most strength behind it. And it's not because he yells or anything like that. You've been watching him digest everything going on. And then when he speaks, it's like, whoa, you really have been mulling all this over. It's really, really good. And it's also worth noting that some of these people have been portrayed iconically in film before. So, like, the performance of Malcolm X, you cannot help but compare that to Denzel freaking Washington. And the performance of Muhammad Ali, you cannot help but compare that to the performance of Will Smith. And these actors measure up to that. I'm not going to say that they're better or worse, but they do not feel inadequate in the face of that comparison, which is an astounding thing because those were amazing performances. This really just captures a moment and these people. It captures a feel of struggle going on in 1964 with everything happening, with the civil rights movement, with these black men doing whatever it is that they do in the face of that, sometimes intentionally trying to help that, sometimes being more deliberate in not being overly associated with that. Their reasons for doing that. It feels like these perspectives on this moment are really well captured. And more importantly, nobody is definitively depicted as being right because these people do clash. The most prominent clashes being between Sam Cooke and Malcolm X. But both of them make really, really valid and compelling points for their positions and why they feel the way they do and why they are moving forward and approaching everything going on in the way that they are. They both make really excellent, impassioned cases for why this is how they are in this moment. And I like that nobody is right and nobody is wrong. It's just complicated. Because it's easy to look back with hindsight. Well, as a white person, it's easy to look back with hindsight and think, well, this was definitely the best way to go about it. And that's not really my place to think that, but I do, because I have an American education, which granted me a very narrow view of the civil rights movement. And I am working bit by bit to try and rectify that. But to see something where you get the understanding of, even though all four of these men were noted and famous, none of these were like just unknown people having to live through this. So, they do exist at a certain heightened position within that moment, but they all have such different perspectives, and they're all valid, even when they clash. And even when they clash, there is overlap, and there is still ground where they agree, just not always. And when they don't agree, you see where the tension is. But with all of them is a desire to see the world get better. It's really, really well captured. And it's funny because to compare this to other things adapted from stage in the last few years that go for anything even close to a similar vibe, like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which I mentioned, like Moonlight, I like this the best out of this whole wave I've seen of these adaptations of stage works into film. I'm not going to delve into making a massive comparison between those three or anything else, but this is the one I would happily go back and watch again. I don't feel compelled to rewatch the other ones. This one, I'm like, I would watch this again. Now that I know better where all these people are coming from, to watch it again and to see where they meet, where they match, where they disagree, and really dwell in that, I'd happily do it again. The performances are phenomenal. The directing is exactly what it needed to be, which is it's a light touch, but you can tell that it was directed confidently. I was kind of blown away by this, and which is a weird phrase to use because it's not a big showy, ooh, this blew me away kind of thing. It's small, it's quiet, it's subtle, it's intimate. But man, does it work. One Night in Miami. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon's how I pay the bills. That is of great assistance. But if you're not able to do that, or even if you are, like, share, and subscribe. Also help me out. Engagement for the engagement gods, aka the algorithm. But, no big pressure. Take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can really just come on back next time you need a break. Patreon shout-outs. Thank you to Turok, Shane Ross, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Robin Powell, Phrenobulax, the Poodle, Edelon, Tracy Scrabbit, Dharma Michael Doyle, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Caspero, Adam Lefty Taylor, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Bookworm. You can support me as well. Hear me mispronounce your name. Sure, I got some of those wrong.